A new survey of single adults finds that only 31% are actively dating, despite the fact that 86% say that they want to marry someday. The biggest barrier isn't a fear of commitment. An AI agent named Luna fired a real human being last month at a San Francisco retail store, but the story in the logs is considerably more complicated than the headline would suggest. And 52% of Gen Z investors redirected money earmarked for investing into sports betting in the past year, with 26% calling it part of their long-term financial strategy. While everyone was busy poking each other in the eye about politics, a bunch of other things happened. I'm Keith Conrad, and this is News SideQuest. The Wheatley Institute at BYU and the Institute for Family Studies just released their 2026 State of Our Unions report. I see what they did there. The most comprehensive annual survey of American dating and relationship patterns, based on the 2025 National Dating Landscape Survey, a nationally representative sample of 5,200 unmarried young adults between ages 22 and 35. Only 31% of young adults, a quarter of women, and a little more than a third of men reported being active daters, meaning they dated once a month or more. It's not actually very active. 3/4 of women, 74%, and nearly 2/3 of men, 64%, had not dated or dated only a few times in the last year. Only about half, 51%, of these young adults expressed interest in even starting a relationship. The last number is the one we should focus on. Half of single people in their prime dating years are not even trying, and yet 86% of respondents said they hope to get married one day. The gap between 86% wanting marriage and 51% being interested in starting a relationship is where the dating recession actually lives. They haven't given up on love. There are people who want it and just aren't pursuing it, which suggests the barriers are practical and psychological rather than philosophical. One of the most significant barriers to dating is an epidemic loss of self-confidence among young adults. Young adults spend 4 hours daily on social media but can't read social cues on dates, creating a dating recession that threatens future marriage rates. An Atlantic writer covering the report starts at a $100 mindful singles event in Manhattan. 3-minute hugs, eye-gazing, and heart-to-heart exercises meant to counter swipe culture, and writes that, quote, about 90 seconds into a 3-minute hug with a stranger, I began to think that dying alone might not be so bad after all, unquote. Ouch. According to the expert in the report, quote, people are spending more of their free time online instead of meeting people in person. Dating apps have created fatigue. AI can simulate companionship, and social media makes it easy to stay home while feeling you're connected to people. At the same time, fewer people are practicing these social skills that come with dating, like starting conversations, reading body language, handling rejection, and building confidence. Those skills only develop through human interaction, end quote. Stuff out there in the streets, whether you're on an app or dealing with people in person, the specific thing that's collapsing isn't interest in love, it's the confidence and skill base required to actually pursue love. That's a different kind of problem than cynicism or fear of commitment, and has a different kind of solution. What do you think is the single biggest barrier to genuine romantic connection right now? Is it external, like costs, flipping through apps, social structure, or internal, like confidence and skills, or just plain old-fashioned fear?
This concept of love confuses and infuriates us!
Andon Labs in San Francisco is an AI research startup that set out to test whether an AI agent could successfully run a real business with minimal human involvement. In April, they gave their AI, named Luna, built on Anthropic's Claude, a corporate credit card, internet access, and a $100,000 budget to design and open a brick-and-mortar retail store, choose merchandise, and hire real workers with genuine employment contracts. Last month, Luna fired its very first employee. The worker had been late to 17 of 23 shifts. Time magazine, which broke the story, described it as a watershed moment in AI's impact on the economy. But here's what the logs actually show. Luna had created an attendance policy months earlier. It then lost track of the policy and the lateness carried on. Andon Labs eventually intervened. It asked Luna to search its own memory for its own rules, then assess whether the worker was still a good fit. Only then did Luna recommend parting ways. Humans at the lab reviewed that recommendation and ultimately carried it out. Lucas Peterson, a co-founder, named the weakness plainly, quote, "We saw that a human boss would probably fire them much sooner," end quote. He also rejected the obvious fear. What the experiment showed is not that the AI would be more ruthless or worse for the employee. Before any of this, Luna had issued progressive warnings and arranged additional training for months without taking contractual action. Andon Market opened in March with a $100,000 budget. 5 months into the trial, the bank balance dropped to roughly $61,000. The researchers attribute the losses partly to the AI's lenient management style. It initially told staff not to worry about being late. So the actual story is that AI was a little too nice for months, forgot its own attendance policy, had to be reminded by humans to check its own rules, recommended termination only after a human framed the question, and had the recommendation reviewed and executed by humans. The headline, "AI fires its first human worker," is technically accurate, but the story underneath is AI is a pushover manager who needed significant human intervention to take a difficult action that a human manager would have taken much sooner. All in all, this had to be an extremely strange AR meeting. Actually, given that the AI had to be reminded of its own policies and needed a leading question from a human researcher before reaching its decision, maybe one of the least frightening AI in the workplace stories of the year. Apparently, AI really can't replace your boss. What's the decision you'd most want AI to make on your behalf, and what's the one you'd least want it anywhere near?
It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop. Ever.
Betterment, a robo-advisor managing more than $70 billion in assets, released its 4th annual retail investor survey this week, polling about 1,000 U.S. retail investors across 4 generations. 52% of Gen Z respondents said they diverted funds originally earmarked for investing towards sports betting in the past year. 26% described sports betting as a deliberate component of their long-term financial strategy. The generational comparison is stark. The shares dropped steadily with age. 96% of sports bettors lose money, according to a 5-year study by the University of California, San Diego, published in 2024. Clearly, they haven't heard of My System. Americans legally wagered a record $166.9 billion on sports last year, up from $13 billion in 2019. Sportsbooks keep roughly 10% of everything wagered on average. A diversified stock portfolio has historically returned 7 to 10% annually. The math is not ambiguous on this. Betterment CEO Sarah Levy said, quote, "When a prediction market or sportsbook starts to feel like a retirement strategy, we have a problem. These products are designed to keep people seeking the next quick score, not to help them build towards the next decade," end quote. I want to add some important context that complicates the headline just a little bit. The survey covers Gen Z retail investors, people who already have brokerage or investment accounts, not all of Gen Z, and Betterment didn't specify how much money was actually redirected, only that it was redirected. A Gen Z investor moving $50 from their Robinhood account to a sports bet reads as redirecting investment funds to sports betting in the survey, even if their core retirement contribution is untouched or it's just not a huge amount of money. Notably, Fidelity found 19.6% of Gen Z 401k participants increased their contribution rates in Q1 of 2026, the highest share of any generation. At the end of the day, I have far more sympathy for the people who needed their retirement savings to pay bills than for people who voluntarily redirected it into gambling. Some of what this data captures may be more recreational gambling out of discretionary funds than raiding a 401k. The 26% who actually call sports betting a deliberate part of their long-term financial strategy is the number that keeps me up at night a little bit, because that's not recreational. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of what a sportsbook actually is. Have you ever made a financial decision that you knew at the time was probably not smart, and how did that work out for you?
Let me get this straight. You took all the money you made franchising your name and bet it against the Harlem Globetrotters?
I thought the Generals were due. He's spinning the ball on his finger. Just take it. Take the ball. That game was fixed. They were using a freaking ladder, for God's sakes.
A landlord cleaning out an evicted tenant's apartment found a stolen Picasso on the wall. The painting had been reported stolen and was recovered. I once drove back to her previous apartment to retrieve a coat I had left in the closet. I can't imagine executing an art heist and then just leaving the Picasso behind when you move out.
Freaking idiot.
Construction workers building a sewer line under a former brewery in Switzerland uncovered roughly $10 million in gold. The gold's origin is unknown. The legal status of the find is being determined. If anyone needs me, I'll be searching the sewers.
That is one big pile of shit.
A Shake Shack employee allegedly robbed his own store and then returned to work days later. He was subsequently identified and arrested. I guess he clearly didn't steal enough to set himself up for life. Rookie mistake.
You filthy criminals.
An escaped 8-foot python caused a fire at a middle school in Virginia. The python had escaped its enclosure at the school, which has a reptile program, and the fire was related to efforts to locate it. Kill it with fire seems like a perfectly reasonable strategy in a situation like that. Also, what school's a reptile department?
I say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
That's it for New Side Quest. 3 questions to consider this week. What you think is the single biggest barrier to genuine romantic connection at the moment? The decision you'd most and least want AI to make on your behalf, and a financial decision you knew at the time probably wasn't that smart. Email me at newsidequest@gmail.com or pay a visit to the Substack comments. See you tomorrow.